This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. I don't know about you, but for me, I wanted 3 things fixed after last season. Now, look, no team can be perfect. Every team's going to have its holes. There are always going to be things that need to be fixed. But I felt like there were 3 major issues wrong with this team that needed to be addressed in the offseason. Felt like receiving was an issue, especially in the red zone. I felt like defensive tackle was an obvious issue, and I felt like there were some changes that needed to be made within the coordinating staff of the Cleveland Browns. Now, the Browns have made major leaps in all 3 of those areas, and I'm going to cover all 3 of those areas individually. And the first area, or at least the area that I'm touching on today, is defensive tackle. Now, how did the Browns address defensive tackle? Now, it hasn't been as overwhelming as I think some people were hoping for, right? Because the problem was so overwhelming. But if I am to stay consistent, one of the things that I've said for a very long time when it came to the issues that this defensive line and the interior of the defensive line has had for a couple of years came down to a number of things. One, a lack of emphasis from the front office and the coaching staff on the position, right? We talked about non-premium picks being used here, non-premium free agency deals. The only things that were ever really thrown at that position were late round picks that have a very low success rate, and 1-year deals for veterans. And I think that led to a number of issues. One, you don't have the level of talent that you want there in that room. 2, and more importantly, it led to a lack of structure in that room, right? The coaching wasn't great. We didn't have great defensive line coaching. The emphasis and the attention paid to the position wasn't great. So there was really no check on the coaching. And then when you lead to a room that's had so much in and out, any young player that you throw in there is not going to be able to develop properly because they're not in an environment to cultivate growth, which leads you to having a self-fulfilling prophecy of 4th-round picks that play terrible because they're basically going out there without any guidance, any leadership, and any real direction, right? We could talk about this with Perion Winfrey. We could talk about this with Jordan Elliott. We could talk about this with Tommy Togiai, Malik McDowell. The list goes on and on. The lack of guidance in this room, the lack of focus in this room, the lack of attention paid to this room has been killing it since like 3 years ago, right? The last time the Browns had decent defensive tackles, it's not a mistake that was when Sheldon Richardson was still a staple of that room, right? You had Sheldon, you had Larry, you had leadership, you had attention in that room. And then all of a sudden, we get rid of those 2. We completely destabilize the room, don't really have a plan to fix it. And then all of a sudden, none of the young prospects can play well. We're getting worse and worse play quality out of these guys each year. That's not just the factor of these guys not being good. That is a symptom of something bigger being the issue with the room. I think anybody that ignores that is trying to be short-sighted to claim a victory about, oh, I didn't like this player in the draft, or, oh, this and that. It's like, no. You cannot like who these players, who the Browns picked as players for defensive tackle. Like, I don't love the Siaki Ika pick. I much prefer the Perion Winfrey pick. Either way, if Siaki Ika was drafted into last year's room, he would probably have been a failure because he would have been dropped into a room that was not equipped to cultivate growth. Now you put him in this room. There is a veteran in the room. There is a emphasis in the position. There is leadership from the defensive coordinator staff on down, and a focus on this room. Siaki has a much better chance of being successful. Perion Winfrey has a much better chance of being successful. It doesn't guarantee that they will, but they have a much better chance. Jordan Elliott has a much better chance of being successful. Think about being him, right? Like Jordan Elliott, not a prospect I love coming out of Missouri. But think about being him for a second. He's drafted to this room and told to be Sheldon Richardson, right? Like that's basically what they did. Hey, this is the guy you're going to replace. We want you to be Sheldon Richardson. He went to Missouri. You went to Missouri. Be Sheldon Richardson. He's drafted to be that. He models everything after that. He works really hard to try to obtain that, whether it's possible or not. Sheldon Richardson is a really good player and a first-round draft pick. And then all of a sudden, they tell him, actually, don't be Sheldon Richardson. Gain 30 pounds. He gains 30 pounds, plays at 30 pounds, and they're like, well, you know what? Never mind. The weight didn't matter. Go back to being like Sheldon Richardson and just rush the passer. How can a player be successful in that environment? When Jordan Elliott had a question on, hey, how do you get over the hump in this way as a defensive tackle, or, you know, what nutrition meal plans do you like to use or anything like that, right? Or, hey, what defensive tackle coaches do you use in the offseason? Who did he have to talk to? Taven Bryan? Like, who was really there to help any of these young players be successful on or off the field in that room? Of course, the draft picks weren't successful. And that's not a way to get Andrew Berry off the hook for having defensive tackle picks that have not bared fruit. That is a issue that is Andrew Berry's fault, right? Like that is a fault in how he picks things. And that's something that I think he realized and like decided to change. You're not, and far too often too, whenever we talk about an issue, I'll point out an issue and somebody will be like, yeah, that is an issue. I hope somebody gets fired. It's like, no. No. You point out an issue so it can get solved. I want people who can point out an issue and realize it and then do something about it, instead of just being like, hey, everything either has to be perfect or not, because that's not real life. So anyways, the defensive tackle room has had these issues. Last year, it finally broke. I've been Chicken Little telling y'all that the sky is falling about this defensive tackle room for about 3 years, and then it finally fell. The room was in disarray. No leadership. Nobody knows how to play. We're just guessing. Everybody on the defensive line is guessing. Now I'll just shoot this gap this play. I'll just go upfield. I'll just rush the passer. I'll just shade here or do that. Just guessing. Nobody had a plan. And it was a disaster. A flat disaster. And anybody who tries to tell you it was anything other than that is lying. It was a disaster. It was some of the worst defensive line tape you'll ever see, especially in the interior. It was some of the worst stuff you'll ever see. Go and look at my Buffalo Bills film review if you don't believe me. If you need visual evidence, go check it out. It's right there. It's publicly available for everybody for free. That's how bad it got. They finally decided they needed to do something. And I felt like so much of the problem had been because of the philosophy about the position from the defensive coordinator level. So that is one of the main reasons I felt like a defensive coordinator change needed to be made. They make that change. Okay, cool. It's one thing to make a change. It's another thing to make the right move. Now, there were a number of guys who were available. Everybody wanted Brian Flores, you know what I mean? Like a number of names. They ended up on Jim Schwartz. Good defensive coordinator, great history of defensive coordination. And one of the things that Jim Schwartz loves is interior linemen. he focuses on the position. So he brings in Dalvin Tomlinson, and that solves two of my biggest issues with the room. I never felt like the talent wasn't there in the room. Jordan Elliott has shown at times he's an NFL player, right? Tommy Togiai, that's a different story. I don't really think he's an NFL player, but Perion Winfrey has showed at times he was NFL. At times he looked like the best defensive lineman in the room, defensive tackle in the room. That's not saying much. Not a high bar to clear, but still like looks like an NFL player at times, despite all the chaos that was going on in there. And then you obviously have Dalvin Tomlinson. And I think that solves so much of the issue there, right? So much of the issue was duct tape solution at the duct tape solution. You got Siaki Ika in there as well. I don't know if I mentioned that. But so much of the problem with the room was duct tape solution at the duct tape solution at the duct tape solution at the duct tape solution. They addressed the problem at the source. Why did we have to put so much duct tape up? Oh, it's because it came from this level, which came from this level, which came from the defensive coordinator. Okay, you change out the defensive coordinator. Defensive coordinator decides, let's put some permanent solutions in there. We don't have the money to completely overhaul it, but we can put a solid solution in there and then hope that the other pieces find their way. That's what they did. So Dalvin Tomlinson, he's going to be the constant in that room. It's imperative that he plays well, right? And plays well for a couple of years, right? Perion Winfrey's not going to become a great player overnight, nor Siaki Ika, nor Jordan Elliott. These are going to be multi-year processes with these players. Jim Schwartz isn't going to magically walk in here, snap his fingers, and then turn everybody into all-pro defensive players. I know sometimes it gets portrayed like that, and I am scared to death that we have used Jim Schwartz in the offseason as this like magic pill that we think that he's just going to snap his fingers and things just going to be magically fixed. It's still going to be a process. Who's in charge is a much more competent defensive person, but it still is a process that this defense needs to go to. Expect bumps in the road, right? Not every week we're going to have great defensive tackle play. Not every week we're going to have great defensive play. There will be bumps in the road. The Browns aren't going to turn from the worst defense in the NFL to the 85 Bears just because Jim Schwartz walked in the door. If Jim Schwartz were that good, he'd be in Canton. Nobody's that good. Bill Belichick ain't even that good. We're talking about it like that, and I do get concerned that we've been so effusive in our praise of Jim Schwartz in the absence of admiration for what the previous person did at that spot, that it's gone to this other direction that has become a birthplace of unreasonable expectations for a defense that quite honestly is just trying not to be a shit show. That's the goal. Like, that's the goal. They could be top 5. Who knows? But the goal is to not be a shit show like last year. And I think they took the steps defensively to ensure that's not going to happen. Because they fixed the problem at the source. They changed the defensive coordinator, which changed the philosophy at that position, which put more emphasis on that position, which put more focus on that position. That then led to a long-term deal being come to for a veteran stud defensive tackle, which will help the young players reach their potential, not just because Dalvin Thomas is going to teach them a couple of things. That's not what I'm saying. But because the environment is better because of the decision you made at the top. You have a better environment because you have focus. You have vets in the room to help them ask things. You have a guy like Jim Schwartz in there to help them along in this pro process. And you have Jim Schwartz guiding whoever the defensive line coach is to be better than the last guy. The environment is fixed. The same reason why we don't really care what young offensive linemen we take and just have trust that they're going to be good is the same reason why I'm hoping that this defensive tackle room is going to be better, right? We believe that offensive linemen here are probably going to be better off because the environment is so good for a young offensive lineman. We have a great coach. We have a great staff. We have a great focus on the offensive side of the ball from the top to the bottom. Offensive line does not get neglected, my bad. And that creates an environment that incubates successful football players. On the defensive side of that position, the interior defensive line, we've had anything but that. Now I'm looking at it and it looks a lot more healthy. And it looks like something to where, hey, maybe Jordan Elliott's not terrible. Maybe this is the change that he needed. Maybe Perion Winfrey could mature a little bit and get back out there and play the good football that we know he's capable of. Maybe Siaki Ika. There's something in him that I don't see that's there that can be extracted from Jim Schwartz or something like that. The environment's better. That's going to change the outlook at that position. That's how I think the Browns fix defensive tackle. Now, if I'm right or wrong, we'll find out in September, November, December, October, wherever you want to say. We'll find out. But that's how they've addressed that position. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.